you mentioned niching, it's such a challenge, right? Everyone's like, oh, but I don't want to limit myself. And a lot of us are multi-passionate and we've got so many ideas and things we want to do. I always say, look, you don't have to choose this forever, but at least for the next, I'd say 90 days, really, one type of client, one type of message, just stick with that. And then you can always add layers on.
Hello and welcome back to Mama What's Next this week. I'm very excited about today's guest because today's conversation is for women who are quietly questioning the way they work, especially after becoming mothers, because so much changes when we become a mom. My guest today, Anna Lundberg, helps women redesign work around who they are now, not who they were before motherhood or a burnout or a major life shift. Anna is a solopreneur business coach and the host of the Reimagining Success podcast. After leaving corporate over a decade ago, she's built a business with sustainable rhythms, prioritizing energy, agency, and life alongside meaningful work. And in today's episode, we talk about why traditional models of success no longer fit and how women are building work on their own terms and how they build companies and business differently and what the future of work in 2026 and beyond looks like for women who refuse to hustle and buy into all that performance-driven productivity. So this is a very grounded conversation, a very honest conversation about designing work that fits your life and not the other way around. So let's dive in. Enjoy.
Stop the battle within your soul. You know it's all in your head. Being sad doesn't make you smart. It seems your heart just needs a fresh start.
Hello and welcome, Anna. I am happy you're joining me today for a conversation about where 2026 is taking the future of work for women, for mothers in particularly. There's a lot changing in the way we work, and there's a lot of shifts in the corporate space and how women are designing their work life going forward. And I think you're the perfect person to speak to about how we could prepare better for what's ahead of us. So Anna Lundberg, welcome to Mama What's Next today. I'm so happy.
Well, thank you, Mark, for having me. It feels like a very timely conversation for me too. I mean, I feel like I opted out and started designing my work more intentionally quite a long time ago now, but it's still, it's always evolving and things, of course, are happening in the world too. So yeah, excited to get stuck in and look at what's ahead for 2026.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Anna, just to introduce you a little bit to the listeners, you're a solopreneur business coach. Is that the right description?
Yeah, so I mean, as many solopreneurs, I wear lots of different hats. The core of my work is very much working with people like me who've left corporate and are setting up, or rather managing a business around their life, really. So it is a lot of mothers, parents, but it could also be just people who don't want to work the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and do work that they don't enjoy and hustle their whole life. So it's really building a business that allows you to do meaningful work, make an impact within part-time hours, but still earn a good living. I do also do work with companies in terms of trying to redesign the workspace from the inside. So that's really looking at, without quitting the 9 to 5, how can we reimagine the system itself so that we in particular women don't have to opt out of that system.
That sounds so interesting, because I feel we need to tackle the system from both sides, right? Like we need to, on one side, as a woman, as a mom, we need to start designing a work life around our life rather than trying to fit into a system that was never really built for us, right? And this is, I think, a lot of the work that you help women do, particularly. But also from the other side, as companies, I think they are starting to realize and react to the shifts on, on our side, like as employees, like we are looking for different ways of working and helping them and consulting on a corporate side to help them understand where's the upside for them in this whole scenario, right?
Well, that's it. And it's interesting because it is a system, as you said, that was designed for factories. It was designed for, 100 plus years ago. It was designed for a male employee and woman at home taking care of domestic life. So it wasn't designed for our knowledge economy, our work that we do today. It wasn't designed for dual career families. And, there's so many things about it that just aren't fit for purpose anymore. There are glimmers of hope in the 4-day work week experiment, for example. Some companies are flexible working around core hours and so on. But I feel like it's experimenting kind of just at the limits, it's kind of marginal tweaks here and there. And this bigger questioning is quite dramatic. And as you said, what's in it for them? There's so many sort of economic interests, I guess, in perpetuating the system, whether it's the schooling with the long holidays and so on, or it's the 9 to 5 and the whole capitalist system. It feels quite drastic to suggest dismantling all of that. And so, it's both a really big problem that we do need to tackle systemically, but it's also empowering, I guess, to know that we do have more agency than perhaps we realize as individuals, and we can choose to work and live differently.
How do you help women, particularly working mothers now? The struggle I often hear is women not being able to fit into that corporate system anymore. They just can't make it work. And it's like this race trying to make something work that just doesn't work for us, right? So it doesn't matter if you're in Germany or you're in Spain or you're in Switzerland. You have 40 hours that you kind of have to fill, right? And if I am now a woman that goes, okay, I've recognized that I don't want to be doing that anymore. Like, where do I start? Like, what do I do? Like, if I'm a woman that never worked in a freelance capacity or as a solopreneur. I've never had a business before, but I'm starting to realize this system I don't want this anymore. And there's a lot of movement in the world. Like, where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's a dramatic, either a health crisis or a redundancy or something that forces you into it, in which case you're kind of forced to scramble. And we're seeing that happening. So people are suddenly, okay, I need to do this very quickly. But if you are in the, I guess, somewhat comfortable position that you do have your job and you can keep that going, obviously the good news is you don't have to change from one day to the next. You don't have to go in and say, I quit tomorrow, and then try to build something quickly. So if you do have the luxury of having the job, of course, then I'd recommend really spending time on getting clear on what it is you want. So one of my first ever bosses in corporate told me when we were changing role, you need to get clear on your criteria. You can't ask for a promotion and the brand you want to work on and move to New York and. You need to be, okay, non-negotiable is that I don't want to work evenings or I don't want to commute more than X. Important criteria are these: I need to be earning this much, or I want to be earning that much, and so on. And then personal preferences as well. And you kind of need to be really clear on what would success look like if this works out exactly as you want it to. What does that look like? And then once you have that vision of what you want, then we can get into the tangible, okay, what business model would support that? Because of course you could consider fractional work as something that's growing quite a bit, which gives you a really nice combination of stability and team, with more flexibility, or you can be more of an independent expert, a coach, a consultant. You can have an online business. There are lots of different models. And I think one of the issues is that so many gurus are kind of telling us that we need to do X, Y, Z. And the first step that we have to do before that is go, okay, what do I want? And then choose and design the business model to support that.
So you mentioned fractional work. What is that? For someone that hasn't heard this term before, working fractional, what does that mean?
Well, like with all these words, there's so much debate as to what exactly it means. It's like coaching, what's a coach, what's a mentor, and so on. And to some extent, we can get caught up in the semantics of it. In a way, it's sort of consulting, freelance, part-time work. You can call it lots of things. But the really nice thing about fractional is, from you asked before, what's in it for them? From the company's perspective, if it's a startup or scale up, they can't afford a full-time CMO, CFO, et cetera, et cetera. So for them, having someone a day a week, a couple of days a week, having access to your level of expertise on a part-time basis, basically. And for you as the individual, as I said, it means that you're coming in then, you're basically doing that role, but fractionally, literally mathematically for, not 5 out of 5, but 1/5 over here, maybe 2/5 over there, whatever that looks like. And again, it means that you're directly applying your skills from your professional experience. You still have a bit more of that stability because you're working, on projects over months, hopefully. So you're not sort of every day trying to scramble for clients, and you get still a really nice element of being part of those deeper projects and team collaborations as well. So it's whether you want to argue about whether it's new or it's been around before, it's certainly something that's growing. It's bigger in the US at the moment, but it is coming more and more to Europe in terms of waking up to how companies can have access to your expertise, but at a fractional time and cost of a full-time employee.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm definitely seeing. People are still going like, what does that mean? Like, what is a fractional head of marketing, for example? And, obviously you're very familiar with the marketing world as well. So if I am a woman, let's say I'm a senior, senior middle management currently, and I'm looking to kind of step out of this world, what do I do to kind of start planning ahead? And especially oftentimes, like in Europe, you don't see these kinds of roles yet. Like, how do I approach that? Like, what do I do? Like, if I want that kind of role and I'm saying, okay, I do want to work part-time, supporting a startup, for example, or supporting in a company like a corporate space, and I don't see these roles anywhere, how would I go about making that happen for me?
I think to some extent it's like any job, although I have never been like a pure career coach helping people get a job, I've always said, look, that, especially now with 500 applicants for jobs, all AI written resumes that are then also read by AI, et cetera, that's sort of a game you can't win. And so relationships are so important to secure full-time roles, right? The ones that aren't advertised, it's even more so. It's, I'm working with this startup over here on their marketing, that I now know they actually need someone who's going to work on, the HR side of things or the sales or whatever it is. I know people in my network. So often, it's tricky because it means you need to be on the inside of those networks, but that is what it's about. It's relationships. And whether it's fractional or any kind of work now, the actual conversations with people with your network are what's going to get you your initial clients. But before that, it's really, a lot of it's the marketing stuff, of course, your positioning and being super clear on the value you bring and your credibility and so on. And on the confidence side and pricing yourself and all these things, it's such a shift from full-time corporate where you get a salary regardless, and that's kind of just coming into your bank, to going, okay, this is now me selling myself. What's my worth? And how can I price myself? How can I translate my skills into language that makes sense for this new audience and so on? So there's obviously work around your positioning, around what exactly you're bringing in terms of value and offer, and who you want to work with. So is it, startups, for example, are notoriously messy, and they're in that kind of just got to make it work, hustle kind of, it's fun, it's exciting. Is that the kind of environment you want to be in, where probably you'll be wearing a gazillion different hats and so on? Or is it rather, let's say, I quite like the scale up audience personally, because they're doing super well. They're hiring lots of people. They're profitable. And that's a really nice place to come in. Then they have budget and they are ready for that next level of, okay, we've kind of been just, let's say, marketing, quite tactically. Now we want someone to come in to actually do the proper brand strategy or the marketing campaign and so on, right? So that's quite nice. But thinking, of course, the classic marketing things, who you're going to work with, what value, and how are you going to do that?
Yeah, that's right. I see women, particularly, women, anyone still that kind of step out of the corporate space, out of the fixed, this is my role and this is what I do, into, let's say, a freelance role, if we say it like a freelance role, and then coming up with an idea, how do I actually position myself? And I've seen that quite often. I've worked on like an interim recruiting side in the past 2 years as well, to see that often senior leaders, when they go out into that space, their resume shows like everything that they've basically done in the past.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. That's a problem, I think, in particularly when you go as like fractional freelance, because you need to market yourself to a company in a certain way. Like, what is your recommendation for people like that? If I want to do that, do I need to address a specific problem? Do I need to pick a specific niche? How do I position myself?
So I think you can almost divide it into sort of the long-term intentional build and then the short-term pragmatic practical. In particular, again, if you're in that situation where maybe you've been made redundant or you've quit for various reasons, you need to get that money coming in right away. So now is not the time, unless you have a lot of savings or a very understanding partner who's very financially supportive, it's not the time to go, oh, what are my, wildest desires? And I'm now going to spend like a year exploring what success means. So a short-term pragmatic thing is finding, over the years, I've often had, there are associate roles, there are, whether it's interim roles, as you said, talking to recruiters and being a bit just scrappy about it, I suppose, not worrying too much about if it's the perfect fit, but at least just get something so that you're not just sitting at home worrying about it. Obviously with a caveat that you still need to have then the time and energy to build the thing you actually want to build. But realistically, those kinds of, partnering with existing experts, there are agencies now who have fractionals there, for example. Could you sign up with one of those? And it just means they do, hopefully, the business development and marketing and so on, and you just kind of show up and do the thing. So the sort of short-term answer is do what you need to do to get something, I suppose. But then in terms of intentionally building it, it's much more thinking about exactly as you said. If you're LinkedIn and your CV, I haven't had a CV in so long, so mine would be terrible if I tried to create a CV now. I'd be scared of applying to a proper job. But really weaving a story and having that red thread. A danger I see, if I become a coach, it's easy to say, oh, I'm new as a coach, I'm completely new. But no, I've had 2 decades of professional experience. And then it's finding that I coached my team on this. I led those training, I facilitated. It's not a full chronological, these are all the things I've ever done. And in fact, for me, for example, my LinkedIn, I've actually kind of almost removed or at least deprioritized my initial marketing stuff because it's now so long ago and not directly relevant, even though it gives me kind of the corporate prestige and credibility. So it's really doing the work in terms of understanding what are you going to stand for, what's the value you bring, and as you said, the problem you solve. That's ultimately what a business does. And even if you're just a solopreneur, you are a business.
It's been a joy sharing this episode with you. And if you think a friend or a family member could benefit from listening to this too, please do send it to your friend, your sister, your colleague, the woman you know who's trying to build work that actually fits her life. And if this show and Mama Was Next has been a part of your world for a while, or you've listened to this episode and thought, man, that's been actually quite helpful, then I would be so happy if you are subscribing and if you leave us a review. This is the most generous way to support me and anyone that's helping to create this show and this edit. And it helps this conversation reach more women who need permission to build work and businesses differently. Thank you for being here. really, thank you for being here and listening. I really, really, really appreciate you.
You mentioned niching, it's such a challenge, right? Everyone's like, oh, but I don't want to limit myself. And a lot of us are multi-passionate and we've got so many ideas and things we want to do. I always say, look, you don't have to choose this forever, but at least for the next, I'd say 90 days, really, one type of client, one type of message, just stick with that. And then you can always add layers on. As I said, I do the B2C and B2B, that's fine, but I can't talk to both at the same time on the same channel. That just gets confusing, so you can have kind of, as one of my friends said, a carousel of projects over time. But when you're first starting, I'd really recommend you probably can't go too specific. So I think most people don't go specific enough, right? So this is my value. My existing network is in banking, so even if I maybe want to move away from that over time, probably in the short term, going to those financial kind of companies is going to be the best bet because I've got the network, I've got the credibility, and that's kind of a hit the ground running solution. And then you can start shifting and applying for or networking with other more interesting areas if you want to. But in the short term, at least, again, it comes back to where do you have the network, the relationships and the credibility already.
Yeah, thank you. When it comes to like, you talked about it before, like obviously, and you talk about reimagining success and work life for working mothers and women, right? And how does that look for you particularly? Like, how did you build that for you in a way where you say, and maybe it's not like that always, like I'd be interested to hear like, how did you define that for yourself and where did you arrive?
So it's a long journey with lots of twists and turns, right? And when I first left, I left my corporate job in 2013. So I took a sabbatical, I traveled in South America, and then halfway through, I handed in my resignation because I knew if I sort of came back, I would just get back into my comfort zone and stay there. And to some extent, I opted out quite early, right? Which is a shame, but it means I never quite got to that super, super senior, high pressure role, I suppose. At the time, I started doing some coaching. I did exercise around my values. So I had things like freedom and authenticity and these things that really guided me. But it really, in the first couple of years, I wasn't doing it very intentionally. So I landed very pragmatically again in digital marketing consulting because that's what I'd been doing. So that was kind of an easy transition out. Then I discovered coaching and I went through what I call my hippie phase when I was traveling and living my best life, but not earning so much money. And then the next stage was, okay, how do I come to terms with, full disclosure, I was single, I had no mortgage, I had nothing, right? So that was the luxury, I suppose, of being very slow to come round to what actually it looked like. But the amazing thing about it is that I designed something that was super flexible and actually worked as my definition of success evolved. So I now have a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old and live down here by the sea with a big house. And it just means that I've been able to adapt and evolve the business model as I've gone. Even having children, when I had a newborn, I was able to do like 5 a.m. calls because my partner had the baby, or like late night. Now I'm far too tired to do that. I can't do that anymore. When I had a newborn and a toddler, that was different. When I had a toddler and a preschooler, and now 12 years after quitting my job, I have 2 kids at school, and actually, they're sleeping better. They're both at school. So now for me, success is term time working. It's 4 hours a day, give or take. Some days are longer, some might be shorter. It's basically sort of 20 hours a week, if you want to call it that. Term time in the UK is 40 weeks a year. So that's just, the container I have. And then within that, obviously, it's making sure I'm focusing on the right things so that I'm getting the income, of course, but also doing meaningful work, working with clients who respect my boundaries, and able to be there, for example, for this afternoon to go to my daughter's concert at school, to be able to do those things. So it's the classic, can we have it all? But it's very much, I do believe that I can pursue my ambitions and have an impact and grow and, have that authority and challenging work. And I want to be present, especially everyone tells me it goes so quickly, right? So we want to be present for those moments while they're still cute and cuddly. And then, see how that evolves again. So for me, it's a very personal definition, but it's also a living and breathing one that can evolve. A couple of years ago, it probably looked different from what it looks like now, and I'm sure it'll change again in a few years' time. So it's giving yourself permission to to redefine even what success was according to you, past you. You don't have to hold on to just because you said something back in the day, doesn't mean you have to now stick with that the rest of your life. And hopefully that's both kind of empowering and a little bit scary, because it means there's no blueprint to follow, but it means you get to make it up as you go along.
Is that something that women particularly and especially mothers struggle with a lot, like giving ourselves that permission to change direction and to change our idea of what we expect from a meaningful, impactful work life?
I think so. I think there's this. I keep using the metaphor of the emperor's new clothes, because looking in from the outside, I'm like, you're naked. Like, guys, you can see that the emperor's naked, but then everyone's still going to the back-to-back meetings and working long hours in a job they don't like, and it's a very odd place to be. And of course, we can't persuade someone who's deep in that belief system to come out. What I would say is there's really a lot of glimmers of hilariously or wonderfully, I should say. In the last week, I've had 2 women come to me saying that they're having what they would call a bit of a midlife crisis, I suppose, but they're both trying to find their way back to who they are. So one is having been in banking for 2 decades, retraining to go into the medical profession. And another is going on a charity walk on the Great Wall of China next year, and hoping to shift into some more meaningful work as well. And it's so exciting to see. So I think, yes, it is really hard for mothers, especially, to put ourselves first. But it's also, those 2 examples show that it is possible, hopefully with a supportive partner and with the financial resources and so on. The other, if that feels too dramatic, examples I'm seeing is, I have mums on the school run who are struggling with, you've got to drop them at 2 different schools and then run to the meeting at 8:30 and then the late nights and so on. And a couple have actually shifted roles or companies. In one case, actually, they got more money and more flexibility. That's a win-win, right? You might think you need to compromise, but actually having the awareness and the curiosity and the confidence, I suppose, to look for a better solution and not just resigning yourself to, oh, this is how it has to be. So probably going, listening to podcasts, going to events, talking to other people outside your little bubble, and just hearing those success stories of other women who are making smaller shifts or slightly bigger role company changes, or even more dramatically, perhaps, starting up on their own.
And I just want to pause here for a very quick minute and just let this be a reminder to you. This is really important. So many women leave the corporate space and a role that no longer fits, and they think freedom will just magically appear on the other side. And then one day they look up and realize, well, I rebuilt the same pressure and the same work life, just under a different name. And if that's you, I've been there. Nothing's wrong with you. It happens to so many of us. And this is the exact moment where your question needs to shift from what work can I do to how do I actually want to live and work? And that's not an answer that will stay the same forever. It changes with seasons, with motherhood, with energy, with your lifestyle, your aspirations, your goals. And I just want you to hear this very clearly. You're allowed to design work that fits now. And you don't need to lock yourself into a forever version of success. So that's it from me. Let's get back to our conversation now.
Well, the extreme now from Silicon Valley is 9-9-6, if you've heard of that, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week, which of course is completely impossible if you're a mother. So I don't know what crazy person came up with that. But it's kind of rebelling against that narrative and working out what's going to work for you.
Yeah, I think we're still we need to actively work against that system, and it's great to see more and more voices actively talking about a new way to work and a different way to work, and that we have a choice and we can build it in a different way. If I'm not like if I'm not like a working mother right now that is, struggling with, burnout or redundancy or something like that, and I want to plan ahead properly, like to rebuild that for me. Let's say I want to create my own business, and I especially don't call it a side hustle because I don't like the word hustle. I want to build my like a business and potentially do some freelance work on the side. Like, how long before I start with that? Like, what's the sort of process that you recommend, or what will you say? When do I start planning?
Yeah.
And if I'm still working, and how do I approach that?
It's such a good question. I think it starts with both curiosity and patience. It's looking at, rather than worrying, oh, how will I make it work financially? Let's look at the finances black and white, see, what your saving situation is like, what income you actually need, where can you cut costs and so on, right? It's looking at what the reality is. Hopefully you'll be reassured when you see the reality, and it might not be as bad as you think, or you'll go, actually, now is not the right time because of X, Y, Z, and that's okay too. But at least you kind of looked at it. So looking at the finances and then looking at your capacity in terms of time. If you're in, at the extreme, a toxic, long hour, 80-hour weeks, you don't have time and energy and so on, then realistically, your energy then to come up with something else is going to be quite limited. So there, it might be, if you can go part-time, or perhaps change a role as an interim. As much as I'm such a believer that you can, and almost dare I say it should work for yourself, because it's so empowering, and that's when you really have the autonomy over your time and the work you do. It might be that as a means to an end, you shift just to carve out more time and energy. I have clients, of course, who have maybe 1 day a week when they can work on their business, and maybe 2, and that's amazing. But again, if you've got 4, 5, 6 hours, if you're thinking, first of all the strategy of positioning and thinking all that through, but then the actual marketing, sales, business development, admin, accounting, you can only get so far with a day a week or working evenings here and there. So, if you're in it for the long haul, there's no need to be in a rush. And I definitely start tentatively, again, listen to podcasts, start just with a notepad and pen, and start journaling and thinking about it, talking to people. Obviously, working with a coach can really help you do some of that particularly earlier positioning work and so on. So you kind of save time rather than fumbling in the dark if you're not quite sure what you're doing. And then coming up with a plan, really. And it might be longer than you think, or it might be shorter. One of my favorite examples, and it was a friend actually years ago, I did some coaching with her, and she said, oh, my long-term, like 10-year plan is to get a horse and to have a business related to horses. And then within a few sessions, we realized, no, actually, she could afford to get a horse now. And she started an equestrian consultancy business. So it was just, sometimes we go, oh, maybe in the future, in 10 years' time, I might do this thing. And actually go, okay, hang on, maybe, but what could that be more feasible now? So again, it just comes back to painting a picture of what you want and then seeing what might be the steps to get there. There's no magical, people say, you need 6 months of expenses, ideally a year of savings, I'd say. But it just depends on, of course, your financial situation, your energy, your capacity, how flexible your partner is, and so on, right? So it really has to be tailored to you. And that's what I think a lot of the advice is missing. It's like, oh, this is what you do, just follow this blueprint, and then ta-da, it's going to work. And it's so dependent on, as I said, your energy, your family situation, your finances, and so
Does
on.
it depend on the type of business I'm building as well? Like, so do you feel that building a business to consumer, where I might be building like a portfolio career, where on one side I'm working freelance and I work in a consultancy kind of role, part-time in a company. And on the other side, I'm building a business to consumer arm where maybe someone wants to start coaching. And would you say one is faster than the other, and one needs more patience and more capability, more learning, more structuring than the other?
Yeah, I'd say there's a few dimensions to it. One is the buying cycle. The reality is that corporate is really slow. We see again and again, you might have a conversation. I did one offsite last year, and it took, 5, 6 different calls with the general manager and the HR, and it's all budgets are changing and this, that, and the other. And that can be quite a long lead time. But then the big corporate contracts obviously can be pretty lucrative. So that's perhaps worth it. On the other hand, if you want to work with me as your coach, you go, yes, pay, boom, done. It's one person. Maybe you talk to your partner or you have a think about it, So buying decisions can be faster with B2C. Something like being a coach, it's not actually regulated. So I could literally say, hey, I'm a coach, and start charging you today. Most of us want to do training and ethically know what we're doing and so on before we do something. So that, of course, is something to consider. But really, you don't need any infrastructure. You don't, as much as we love doing branding and websites and so on, you could just start saying to people that, hey, I'm coaching X type of women who are looking to do Y. Do you know someone? And you could relatively quickly get a couple of clients. So it's and again, we've talked about the fractional, maybe fractional roles, not so much, but certainly some interim work, maternity cover, something like that could be relatively quick to get. If you want to build, like an online course, sort of passive income where you've got all this, software and systems and so on, obviously that takes longer. You need to build the audience, you need to work out the messaging and the problem you're solving, and then you need to record the stuff and sell the stuff and so on. But there are certainly choices you can make in terms of hitting the ground running. For me, one-to-one coaching is an easier one to do than to have a group program, let's say, because one-to-one, again, you just need one person to say yes, and then you're off, right? So definitely thinking about the different options are on the table, and again, being pragmatic in the short term, even if the vision for the longer term is a bit more nuanced and complicated, and you can build that as you go.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. One interesting question, I think, is with all the change that is happening right now in the world, in the corporate space. I mean, so many people are talking about redundancies, being replaced, but also working mothers like intentionally stepping out of corporate spaces and redesigning their work life. Where do you think, like when we look at the future of work, so to speak, right? Where is it going? Like, what do you see? Like, what kind of trends do you see now, and how is work life changing for us in the future?
So it's interesting from sort of a macro perspective. If you go back, I quite like to go look at sort of the history of things. But again, the 9 to 5 is relatively recent, but still the assumption that that's sort of the natural thing, the factory work. And then you had sort of the Second World War, where women came into the workforce. You had digital coming in. Of course, COVID kind of sped things up. We were actually able to see that we can work remotely and flexibly and so on. And then you have a bit of the backlash now with the return to office mandates and things. So there are sort of macro trends happening. I think, without getting political, a bit like politics, it's quite polarized. So you've got if we're going to be stereotypical about it, sort of old white CEOs who are saying, you've got to come to the office, you've got to work these hours, all about corporate and the capitalism and the hustle culture of Silicon Valley. You've got that kind of end of the spectrum, the Elon Musk quite toxic work culture, I would say, with a bit of bias. And then you've got in my space, I'm in a bit of a bubble because I see so much of it because that's the work I do. On LinkedIn, all I see is wonderful people trying to change things. So whether it's making workplaces more accessible for neurodivergent individuals, there's a big, amazing campaign in the UK run by someone called Elliot who it's called Parenting Out Loud. So it's particularly about dads, actually, but saying, hey, I'm going to pick up my kids now, not, pretending and covering and hiding that. So I interviewed a guy on my podcast recently, Nigel Kilpatrick, who's all around compassionate leadership. He comes from quite a toxic tech kind of culture, and he's repositioning, so there's so many people working at this end of the spectrum where we're trying to shift things, as we said from the beginning, both systemically inside and then, unfortunately, to some extent, by opting out. Unfortunately, there is also this other side, the pendulum kind of swings both ways, right? But what I would say as an individual, again, is you get to choose, just know that that's not all there is, this kind of Elon Musk 996 kind of world. There are, even if you don't want to work for yourself, there are companies, and I see them talk about it a lot on LinkedIn, they have parental leave, not just maternity leave, and they have, 2 proper weeks off for Christmas, hooray, and they whatever it is, or Fridays off, or there are things like that, the 4-day work week again. So it's again getting clear on what you want and then looking for the best match for you, and there are more and more solutions. So it's tough to predict. Obviously, AI has the potential in a way to free us up to do more interesting work and to do less work, but at the moment it's just making us do more. So, you know, technology always promises wonderful things, but unless we change how we show up and behave, you know, it just becomes more of the hamster wheel, just kind of more busy work rather than, as we're hoping, kind of reducing that and doing more of what really matters.
Well, and I thought I loved now how you spoke about AI and technology in a positive way for a change, because often what I see these days is all this fear mongering online about like everybody is stealing our jobs, we won't have anything to go back to. And I think it's really so important that we have some positive voices that talk about there's actually, and it's so nice that you said that now, there are companies that actually choose to work differently. And I always feel like even companies, when they do a lot of optimization through AI, there's just as many companies, I think, that say, oh, I don't want that actually. I want to, you know, stay in touch with humans, and I want to have like a customer service that is different, and there will always be a different route to choose from. Would you agree? Or
But by the way, as a solopreneur as well, I have to say AI is a game changer, right? The amount, you know, if I take my podcast, for a while I had an assistant doing. I think back in the day I was doing my own transcriptions, which blows my mind. That was absurd that I even did that, right? But then I was doing a lot of different tools and it took me hours. And now I've created a custom GPT. I say, give me all the assets, boom. You know, I did like 10 episodes up on Monday, no problem. Obviously having a bit of a sounding board as well. There's so many things I'm sure that I haven't even tapped into, you know. So yes, it's annoying that everyone's just using AI to post on LinkedIn now and there's a lot of noise, but that also means there's an opportunity to stand out with more personality and a point of view. And I'm being drawn to in-person things now, actually, as much as I've been really virtual and remote. Meeting people in real life is just such a nice way to connect the dots, to have that interaction anyway, but also to build trust with them, right? So you're not just a flat person they're reading online, but they're actually, I'm getting people saying, oh yeah, I've been following your podcast and now we've had this personal interaction. It's so nice. So certainly as an individual solopreneur, it means you could have essentially a team without having to almost pay anything at all, which is, you know, hugely exciting. And if you're inside a company, again, there's ways to, in fact, I have a client who now helps women leaders use AI to not be scared of it, you know, which is great. So there's definitely lots of possibilities. It's so uncertain and nobody really knows right on the macro scale again. So all I can say is continue to be curious and, you know, learn and so on. And ultimately, whether you're going to work in a company or for yourself, taking ownership of your own career, I think, you know, making sure you're upskilling, building a network. My worst thing is when I see on LinkedIn people who have like no picture on LinkedIn, or their whole identity is just, you know, senior VP at this company, and that's all they are. And it's unfortunately, you know, you're really putting yourself at risk there. You are more than just that job title, right? And realistically, we're not going to be like our grandparents working at the same company our whole life until we retire. And so again, even if you're not urgently now considering going out on your own or changing, it's far better to put the pieces in place before you need them. So if you can now build your personal brand, talk to people, make sure everything is kind of up to date, again, learn new skills, make sure you're staying on top of things, that's only going to be a positive, whatever happens, trying to, insofar as you can, kind of future-proof yourself against whatever comes next.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, but you're not your job title exactly. But for some people, that's very difficult, I think, to separate yourself from this if it's always been like that. And then when you do lose that role and that job and that company, it's like a big part crumbling, right? And before we say goodbye now, I want to ask you as well, in what kind of capacity, what's your sort of the way you help women rebuild their next chapter? How do you do that, particularly like as one-on-one coaching you said, but is it also the systems that you help them set up, or do you have like a focus area where you say this is like how I help them tackle X, Y, Z if they were to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's really now looking at what I'm calling the solopreneur operating system. So it's looking how you design the business, how you create demand, and then how you make your delivery sustainable. And so it's looking at designing intentionally your business model and making sure you have the marketing and sales system in place, and you're not kind of constantly on that awful content hamster wheel where you kind of chasing the algorithm and so on, which a lot of people I see have. And then, of course, making sure that the delivery, actually running the business as well as delivering the work, is then sustainable for you and your family. And so I actually have a new program called The Architect, which is all around designing your own blueprint for your business. So that's everything we've talked about in terms of from really designing what that next thing looks like to actually building it out. And then, yeah, the one-to-one, of course, is more tailored then to make sure. But I love the group vibe. You know, the best thing is feeling that you're not alone and having other men and women who feel the same as you do. And that was one of the biggest changes for me when I went to an event back, 12, 13 years ago, being surrounded by others who felt the same as me, who felt, oh, there must be something more than this. Like, I feel like, I could do something. And that was so reassuring to me that there are others, just like in the lens what we're talking now, there are others who don't want to work late into the night after the kids have gone to bed and have the kids in wraparound childcare just so that you can stay a bit longer in a meeting or do a PowerPoint presentation or whatever. I don't want to trivialize the work you're doing, but it's there is a different way to work. So yeah, I'm excited to see that both again with individuals and also then hopefully in broader sort of economic and business terms as well.
Thanks to the work you're doing now, that helping us restructure and set up in the most efficient way and hopefully cut some of the mistakes that we might be doing without someone. So thank you so much.
I think as women, it's so easy to think we have to do it ourselves and not want to ask for help. My first ever job, I was given that feedback right away. Like, you have to ask questions. And of course I do, because of course, as we say, I don't know, like an athlete will have a coach and like a CEO will have a coach for his. It doesn't mean that you're not capable. It's just that realistically, there's a lot of things you don't know. And again, it's things like the structure, pricing, offering, sales process and so on. But it's also a lot of our mindset and behaviors and habits and things that unfortunately we take with us, our kind of corporate way of thinking. And if we do, then it's very easy to recreate the very thing that we've left behind and we become our own worst boss. So definitely there's so much information out there, almost too much right now. But definitely there are people, there are programs, there are communities that can help. And that just means that you'll get there so much faster than if you kind of try to struggle along.
Yeah, that's right. So much faster. That's that it's really worthwhile spending the time and the money upfront to make sure that you're well prepared and well set up, I think, and not making unnecessary mistakes that you can work around, I think.
Yeah, there's a cost in time and there's also the cost in money, right? There's the two. So definitely worth investing in yourself.
So Anna, where can we find you? When we're obviously, I link everything in the show notes, but also for anyone that wants to connect with you and learn more about how you can support them, how can we?
Yeah, so if you go to intentionalexpert.com, that's where everything around this solopreneur operating system is. I'm running free workshops on it, and as well my new program, Architect. So that's the best place to go, intentionalexpert.com.
Thank you so much, Anna, for joining me today. It's been great conversation, so much information we raced through.
Yes, I hope it wasn't overwhelming, but my whole brand is called One Step Outside. So what I would say as a closing thing is just take one step. Again, listen to a podcast, talk to someone. You don't have to rip everything up and start again today. It's just maybe just say no to that meeting that's outside of the hours, or set the boundary. Take a day off if you can. Just start with those little things, just breaking your pattern, and then seeing how you can start reimagining what success looks like for you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Anna. It's been a great conversation. Goodbye. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I definitely did. And I loved how much information and value we've been able to pack into this. And I just want to give you the quick takeaways for today's episode. Number one, the 2026 shift is moving from success on paper to success that actually fits your life. So many women look successful from the outside, good title, steady income, but feel quietly trapped on the inside. The 2026 shift is now choosing work that fits your energy, your values, and the season of life that you're in, and not just what looks impressive. If it doesn't work with your real life, it's actually not working. Number 2, the 2026 shift is designing work around capacity, not pushing through exhaustion. Motherhood changes what you want and what you can sustainably give. Instead of asking, how do I do more? How am I more productive? How can I squeeze more into my schedule? The 2026 shift asks, what works within the energy I actually have? This is where part-time, term time, and flexible business models stop being less than and start being intentional. Number 3, the 2026 shift is building optionality before you need it. Waiting until burnout, redundancy, or resentment forces your hand is costly. The 2026 shift is gently building options. That means fractional work, consulting, coaching, portfolio careers, while you actually still have stability. Not hustling, not panicking, just giving yourself a little bit room to move. Number 4, the 2026 shift is letting go of one fixed identity. You are not your job title. You are not one business model. You are not locked into decisions you made in a different season. The 2026 shift is allowing your work to evolve as you evolve, without seeing that as failure or lack of commitment. Changing your mind is not a weakness. You are totally allowed to do that. Number 5, the 2026 shift is redefining ambition. This isn't about opting out of meaningful work or impact. It's about opting out of performative productivity. The 2026 shift is wanting work that matters to you, that pays you well enough, that respects your boundaries and doesn't cost you your health or presence. So that means your ambition will stay with you, but the hustle and the grind, that can go. The 2026 shift is building slowly, intentionally, and on your terms is number 6. You don't need to blow up your whole life or follow someone else's blueprint. The 2026 shift is taking one thoughtful step at a time. Just experimenting, just learning, just refining, without forcing anything into certainty if you're not quite there yet. Sustainable businesses are built by women who listen to themselves, who listen to their intuition. So 2026 shift isn't about doing more or moving faster. Let's move out of the grind. Let's move out of the hustle. We are now building work that fits our life, that fits the way we live right now, and we are imagining new solutions, new ways of working. We are looking actively, intentionally to build work with clarity, with agency, with self-trust. And we are looking actively for projects, for work that can do that for us. And we're not longer squeezing ourselves into systems that work against us. Thank you so much for listening today. It's been a joy sharing this episode with you. And just before you go, if this episode was very valuable to you, and if you think a friend or a family member could benefit from listening to this too, please do send it to your friend, your sister, your colleague, the woman you know who's trying to build work that actually fits her life. And if this show and Mama Was Next has been a part of your world for a while, or you've listened to this episode and thought, man, that's been actually quite helpful, then I would be so happy if you are subscribing and if you leave us a review. This is the most generous way to support me and anyone that's helping to create this show and this edit. And it helps this conversation reach more women who need permission to build work and businesses differently. Thank you for being here. Really, thank you for being here and listening. I really appreciate you. Have a beautiful week. Bye.
Stop the battle within your soul. You know it's all in your head. Being sad doesn't make you smart. Seems your heart just needs a fresh start.